And welcome to another edition of the Nerdy Agent Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Pettersen, with my brothers and fellow nerds, AJ and Josh. This week, we are going to talk change kind of tune a little bit and chat about how you can advise your clients who own houses at lower interest rates in the future. So let's say 2 years down the road. It's no secret that the vast majority of homeowners have interest rates near 3%. And so we wanted to give you something you can arm yourself with that not only can help you be a really good agent and advisor to your clients, but possibly then use that to grow your business in the future based on people wanting to work with you and respecting how you run your business. But first, the would you rather of the week, which I like this one. I came up with this one myself. Would you rather own Target Field or US Bank Stadium?
God, this is a really good one. I would say maybe US Bank because you can be in there all the time. And it's really cool. It kind of feels like you're indoors and outdoors all at the same time for those John Mulaney fans. So I'm going to go with US Bank Stadium.
Do I own it in cash? Like I have it?
You own it, yeah.
It's worth a lot more money.
I think US Bank's worth more. I would
over
own that.
$1 billion.
I think I'd own that one, then I'd sell it, and then I'd do something else.
You can't sell it. If you own it, you can't sell it.
I like Target Field better.
Target
Target Field's so pretty. I love baseball. So I tend to gravitate towards Target Field.
So I was US Bank Stadium right away, solely because of the fact that I could use it all year round.
It's also newer.
That mattered.
Probably
that mattered.
has less wear and tear.
Also,
Luke also hit a really cool home run at US
Also,
Bank
fun
Stadium.
fact, Target Field, you can't turn Target Field into a baseball field or a football field, really. US Bank Stadium makes a pretty sweet baseball field.
I've heard there's a nice baggie in right field.
And there is a nice baggie.
Pretty
It's
nice.
short, not very far. Wait, fun fact and question, actually. Who owns Target Field in US Bank Stadium? Is it the
teams?
The teams own them?
Yeah,
Okay.
they're really good at asking the public for money to fund a stadium that they
they
then
own.
It's like if we ask the taxpayers to pay for the houses that we're buying.
We should do that.
We should maybe try that. It's real good.
We could talk to the St. Louis Park City Council, perhaps.
It's a great idea.
All right,
Billionaires need subsidies.
Let's get into what actually matters here. To start, I want to just remind the listeners, if they don't know, if they haven't listened to our other podcasts, where the homeowners are at with interest rates. So how many people, it looks like we have some stats here, have rates below these certain interest rate breaks?
So right now, because we're talking about rentals today, so it is important to, and we've talked about this a lot, as people think about selling their homes, the biggest challenge right now is that the rate differential between what you're at and what you go to makes it seem unappealing. So right now, 91.8% of people have a rate below 6%, which is pretty standard. That considering that just happened in the last year, we went above 6. 82% are below 5. 62% are below 4. So that's the biggest differential, right? If you're at 4 or below, and the rates today are closer to 7, 62% are giving up at least a 2% bump in their interest rate, maybe even closer to a 3% bump. And even 23.5% of people, so almost 1 in 4, has a rate below 3. So that differential is 3 to 4% compared to where rates are today. So actually probably at least 4%. It's a pretty significant gap that when you think about the impact, on a monthly payment standpoint, is going to make a huge difference for folks.
And it looks like these are all off from their highs by a little bit just because people have been purchasing homes over 6%, obviously. So
it's going to always
I was just
go
going to say
down.
that 4%, below 4% number definitely was 80% like 4 months ago, wasn't it?
I thought it was. I mean, some of these publications, it kind of depends where you're getting your data from, I think, too. But to Josh's point, I mean, below 6 is completely undoable other than getting crazy buy downs or ARM products or something super special from a specific bank. So to see almost 92% of homeowners have under 6%, if they were to repurchase their house right now, they couldn't even afford it. Literally almost everybody couldn't get the rate that they currently have.
Nope.
Oh, for sure. And what's the difference? So we can put this into numbers. Like if you're buying a $500,000 house and your rate was 4%, and now you're buying a $500,000 house, your rate's 6%. What's the difference in monthly payment from a principal and interest standpoint?
Well, yeah, it's just interest. So the interest spread is about $500 a month
In that scenario. So if you think about that's like a 2% gap, but if you were going from 3 to 7, it might be $1,000 a month. So, or you mean that tends to go relatively similarly across the math works pretty similar.
For the listeners, we are making some assumptions in this podcast just to make the numbers easy. So like I did 4 to 6 obviously 3 to 7 right now. 7.5 almost in some respects. So that's just from 4 to 6, which just as an example, about $500. Obviously 3 to 7 is going to be more. It was probably $1,000.
Probably closer to $1,000. So like think about the impact of that it's pretty
massive.
Substantial.
And so for those who don't know, which we've talked about a little bit on this as well, the Nerdy Agents are big proponents of rental properties. We historically have talked to our clients a lot about that. We actually also own and manage 17 single-family properties in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, in the Twin Cities area. And we talk a lot about being better than the standard agent. So this weekend, I was actually thinking, and last week we talked about the interest rates and where our financial advisor thinks they're going to go in the next 18 months, thinks they're going to be closer to 5.5%. And I was thinking, what's going to happen to the standard real estate agent when interest rates are 5 to 5.5% in 2 years? The standard agent is going to go on social media and they're going to go, it's the best time ever to sell your house right now. Get the equity of your house now, right, while you can, right? Inflation is because maybe showing that it's going up because rates go down, people spend money. Prices aren't going to stay where they are. You got to get your money now. And today I want to talk about discussing an alternative option that you can be way more of an advisor to your clients versus being a used car salesman, and putting them and this is maybe a little bit cheesy, but like you could legitimately in this scenario change some of your clients' lives. Mm-hmm. You could help them actually create wealth through real estate, which all these agents always talk about, but don't actually take the steps to actually do.
Unless you're helping them buy a rental property.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Unless you're helping with rental properties.
Yes.
And so being more of an advisor versus chasing commissions. And so getting into that then, and this is kind of a softball, but
why do we call ourselves the advisory?
Exactly. This is kind of a softball, but I wanted to make sure you guys know what we do. So when someone calls you and says, hey, I'm thinking about selling my house, what's the first thing that you'd bring up? Like, what's that conversation look like?
Well, and I mean, we have some notes on here. I can kind of go off the cuff, but I guess I'll first say, since we own rental property and we've been doing this for a long time, like 6 years, I think now, and you guys probably are the same, tend to attract people who are interested in the same sort of thing, right? Mm-hmm. So I've had a lot of folks buy the house with me back when we started investing with the intention of potentially renting it out in the future.
Yep.
But I've also had people that come to me that have had that as an option, or they've at least brought that up when I've talked about, we could list this house. Have you thought about renting this house? So I think it definitely depends on the situation you're in. And I think a lot of folks even come in to me and say, I could rent my house out. And I say, this house, you kind of fell into a potential rental property, but this one maybe doesn't make a ton of sense because you're not really going to make anything on it. But the folks that came in early with that intention, or who bought at a price point where it makes a ton of sense back in 2014 to 2019, and now are moving up and buying something bigger, a lot of times they are falling into a situation where they've refied to 2.75, 3%, whatever. Their payment is super low. Maybe they bought a house in St. Louis Park, for example, that was $300,000, and they can make $800 a month. They have a little bit of extra cash to purchase the next house anyways, and now they're sitting on a bunch of equity, a really good payment, and a potentially, like Luke said, life-changing opportunity to put their kids through college by just owning one rental property.
And not even just St. Louis Park. I'm talking first-tier suburbs anywhere. New Hope, Crystal, Robbinsdale, Minneapolis, St. Paul, West St. Paul, Brooklyn Park, Fridley. I could list them all.
Looks like the guy from
Any
Best in Show
first-tier
naming
suburb.
nuts. Have you seen that bit?
No.
Harlan Pepper, you quit naming nuts. Pistachio nut. This keeps going. It's so the challenge. So not even to backtrack here a little bit, but to talk about the reality of our jobs, right? So we talk about this podcast. We created this podcast because we wanted to bring more economics into the way people are thinking about real estate. I know this podcast doesn't seem very economically driven, but the reality is it actually is very much driven by the concept of incentives, right? So the way that economics works is people have incentives and they do the things that the incentives drive: buyer behavior, people behavior, et cetera. We as agents have this weird setup where we are incented to sell houses. It's no different than when I talk about going to the dentist, which I hate going to the dentist.
Incentivized to tell you need a cavity filled.
Yeah, they make more money if they tell me my teeth are bad. So it's a weird incentive system where I want the service, but the service is actually incented to do something that is not what I want. And I feel like a lot of times agents fall into that trap where they're like, well, the market's bad right now, and therefore I need to do something to drive business. Let me go on social media and talk about, you got to sell your house. But the reality is like, you need to be aware of those incentives and when those incentives are pushing you a certain direction, because we've all been in that place where it's like, oh, it's kind of hard right now. Like I gotta feed my family. I gotta make some money. We gotta sell some houses. But the more that you fall into traps that in those incentive moments cause you to do something that is not beneficial to your clients, you're doing the wrong thing. And so I guess from an economic standpoint for today, I want to leave you with that. But when we talk about what we do, and AJ's point, Luke's point, we're always trying to think about what the client wants and how we can do the thing that's best for them. The company's called the advisory group because the goal is to advise people that are interested in buying or selling or renting or managing any sort of real estate. And we have to take the perspective of what is best for them when we're going through that process, even if sometimes it's not best for us in terms of our own financial performance. So when it comes to renting, we'll ask this question because we've been in the rental business long enough. We understand the math well enough, and we can look at somebody and say, in your situation, this makes sense probably if you want to deal with X, Y, and Z. Or in your situation, maybe it doesn't make sense because there's other factors that just, even though renting this house would make sense for some people, because of maybe you need the cash for your next house or whatever you need, it still probably isn't the right decision for you.
So we are making some assumptions. So let's say you ask them and say, hey, have you thought about renting it? They say, no, I haven't, but that sounds interesting. The first two objections are always going to be, well, I need money to buy my next house, and I need to be able to afford my next monthly payment. Now, I tell everybody...
Don't forget the third objection, which is,
I don't
know if I want to be a landlord.
Yes, we're not... Yeah, I'm going to get to that one as well. That one's less... That's an objection, but it's less important to me because I can convince people to take that on, I think. But let's assume they can save the 5%. I tell everybody that. I say, well, first off, I don't like to assume that people are going to just have liquid cash because that's hard to get.
Yep.
And so I understand if you don't. If you can't, you can sell it and get the equity and move on. If you can pull 5% of the purchase price, and I'm teeing people up right now, some of my clients, start saving monthly right now to get 5% on your next house. If you can do that, let's talk about this rental arbitrage thing, which I believe AJ taught me a couple months ago, where you rent your place. So let's say you buy your next house and your payment goes up $1,000 compared to your house because interest rates, because of price, what have you. You then just need to figure out how much of that $1,000 you can eat in cash and how much more you can rent your house for above what your mortgage payment is.
Yeah, if your payment on your new place matches the rent you can receive on your current place, then you're just net even.
Net even plus you're paying principal down each month.
And you're getting a bigger house, and you get all the tax benefits of the ownership of a rental property.
And so what you need to do is you need to run the numbers with your clients. Sit down with them and say, what would we rent your place out right now for? If you don't know how to do that, it's very easy. All you do is go on Zillow and find some rentals in the area that people have posted that look pretty similar and pretty same size, same quality. And you'll just about, every time I go on there, I just about find it.
Yeah, there's always something that you can kind of compare against. Note the amount of, like, it's similar to like comping out a house on the MLS, right? You say, okay, here are the ones that have sold recently. Here's how long they sat on the market for. Here's what they sold for. Therefore, your house is roughly worth this. You can go on Zillow and say, here are the ones that are for rent right now. Here's how long they've been sitting there for. Here's how your house compares to these houses. Here's a rough range, and I'm usually within about $200 of. I can say it's $2,200 to $2,400, and it's almost always in that range.
And then in that situation, it's pretty simple. Just start at $2,400.
Yep.
And if nobody's interested, just drop it to $22,000. They don't notice.
Make sure you're thinking about bedrooms, and make sure you're thinking about demographics of who's going to rent that house. Because sometimes, like, if it's going to be in a place where it's going to definitely be a young family based on the layout of the house or whatever, like, think about who's going to likely be the renter, so that you can think about the price point there. Because if you find a 4-bedroom house, but it's in a spot or laid out in a way that it's not going to have 4 different individuals renting the house, the rent you're going to get for that house is lower than if it's, 4-bedroom split that everyone can kind of get to their own bedroom and pay their own monthly rent.
And so you should run these numbers with them and figure out how much more can they make, how much can they eat themselves, and what that looks like to buy the next house. And I do think a lot of people, assuming you can get over the rental objection of not wanting to be a landlord, which I tell all of them as well. I say, here's the deal. We will have a property management company, but you should be able to do this yourself, and you shouldn't pay anybody because it's really not that difficult to manage one property. what I want to get into is why that should be like, what's the incentive for agents to do this as well? How can we convince agents that they can grow their business by netting a negative sale in this situation?
I mean, I can give one example. I probably have 10 of these. I had a client, 2019, came to me, saw that they were a referral of another referral. We become very good friends. They said, we'd like to buy this property. Here's all the things that we'd like to do to a house. If we did buy it, we're pretty handy. They happen to be in St. Louis Park, to your example, first ring suburb. I think they paid $325 for a 4-bed, 2-bath. They did a bunch of work in the basement themselves. They probably spent 10 to 15 grand fixing this thing up. They got refinanced. I think they're at like 275 now. Their payment's like under 2 grand. I want to say it's like $1,800 and they're overpaying a little bit. But they had a kid and they're trying to grow their family. I found them a house where, again, another pitch for understanding construction. I found them a house where they weren't too excited about it. Then I showed them pictures of a previous client who Gustavo did a project for that was the exact same floor plan. And I said, you guys can just do this to this house. Here's how much it's going to cost you. Gustavo came to the inspection. The bid was exactly what I said it was going to be. And now they're putting in this like brand new main level and it's going to be just a super knockout. But point being, when they came to me, they said, we would be interested in potentially renting this in the future. Mm-hmm. I never even talked to them about selling that house. We sat down at this table. I showed them everything they need to know about renting a property. They leased it to the first person who saw it for $3,000 a month. It's a nice house and they're going to do very, very well on it. But I've been in touch with them about rentals, about buying, about the real estate market, about everything. I've never approached it with what's in it for me. They've probably referred me to 5 more clients in that time period since 2019 because my goal, to the point of this podcast, I'm not better than everybody else because I do this. I just think about it and I'm thinking, what can I do to be valuable for these people? Once you're really, really valuable for somebody and you have knowledge that they can't get and you provide it to them, then every time they talk to somebody, they're going to talk about their rental property, about how their agent helped them so much, even though they didn't make a dime on it. They're going to talk about all the construction knowledge that I had to help them with this whole process. And they're just going to continually refer me out to other people who, by the way, are probably looking to buy and sell real estate. The flip side of that is I know this client, like these people are going to get addicted to investing in real estate because they're going to do very well. They're super type A. They're going to be very organized and do a great job for their tenants. And then in 3 years, I can almost guarantee you they're going to come back to me and they're going to say, hey, thanks for all the help on that. We'd like to buy another rental property now. So there's just so many ways that this can spider out if you just don't focus on trying to make money right now. More so, we like back to the beginning of the conversation, we focus on providing the value and an exceptional service, and it's going to pay off in the future.
And I think what you're talking about is like when you think about any of your time that you're spending as an agent going out, you might be chasing down leads, you might be working with a client that's a friend, you may be doing something else in terms of like admin work, but everything you do is kind of like a cost benefit, right? If I'm going to put this cost and this time in, am I going to see any benefit or return on it? People are kind of constantly computing in their head, am I going to make money? The biggest mistake people do make, though, in that process is they think about it in terms of, am I going to make money in the next 3 months? Am I going to make money in the next month? No one really does the math in terms of what can I do for myself that's going to be beneficial 3 to 5 years from now? And it's a lot harder to see if some of these things are going to turn into something 3 to 5 years from now. But I think what we've all learned at this table is just being there for people and answering their questions with expertise and providing things, even when you're not getting paid in the next month to 3 months, has always turned into something beneficial down the road. You can't always see what it's going to be, but that doesn't matter. The point is to be good and be helpful. And if you do that, there's always good things that come behind it. And so I don't know. I constantly am putting on that hat of, it's not my job to chase down a commission. It's not my job to go get a client today. It's not my job to force somebody into a house or to force somebody to sell a house or convince, I guess is a better word. My job is to be helpful. And if I'm helpful, it's every time I've done it, it's something good has come on the back end. So to AJ's point, that's the approach.
You got to think about the real estate industry as a career instead of just trying to catch the next sale. And I will say that person likely does attract you in the sense of getting somebody who's going to give them that advice, which is reasonable. However, I will also say there is a world in which that person gets connected to an agent that says you should sell now. It's a great time to sell and you should buy. That agent sells their house, helps them buy a house, never contacts them again. that agent gets 2 sales and AJ gets 6.
Yeah, or probably ends up
more, but in the same, right? Yeah, 5 right now, right? It does spider at the end. But be the person that thinks about it as a career and focuses on how can they actually help somebody, and it will pay off. Like it's hard to picture when it's never happened to you, but it consistently happens to the point where it's almost a science.
Yeah, well, and there's a stigma about us as real estate agents, right? The general population does not believe that real estate agents, the same way I think about dentists, are supporting you in what you actually need, right? They think that we're supporting ourselves. So the second that you break that mold and show somebody, like, I don't care if I get paid. I just want to be helpful for you. That's my job. And they realize that, and they know it's not, untruthful. They know it's legitimate. They're going to stick with you because they trust you and they believe in you, and they know that they have someone on their side fighting for their needs. And so you're always going to come out on top being that person versus being the one that just, fits the general stigma that everyone has about what we do.
And part of the reason why we started this podcast is we wanted to help agents who wanted to change and do stuff better in order to change the way agents are perceived in the real estate industry, because the perception still isn't great. I think it's getting better to an extent because there are a lot more agents doing work like this. But that's all we have this week for the Nerdy Agent Podcast. And as always, remember, be better